What's up guys, my name is Tim and I'm going to teach you how to do this cool little Doctor Strange effect here. Let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need is a camera, one where you can manually adjust your settings, so this way you can slow down your shutter speed to get this effect. So what I use personally is a Canon 5D Mark IV with a 24 to 70 2.8 millimeter lens attached to it. However, the shot was taken at a 50 millimeter focal length, so one just like this would do perfectly just fine, and this is honestly one of my favorite lenses. The next thing that I use for this shot is a off-camera flash. So with that you need a trigger, something that is going to set off the flash that is behind them. And for that I used a Godox Wistro 8200. And to make sure the flash wasn't spilling all over the frame, I made sure I used a mag mod, which does fit on this, with a grid attached to it. Now the reason why I use a flash in this shot, even though we already have the sparklers, is because it's set to a slower shutter speed. The shutter speed on this is about 6 seconds. And so what the flash is going to do is freeze the subject just a little bit. So if there's any movement, we won't notice it as much. And that's going to be set up right behind them to give this nice angelic silhouette effect. So if you already have a speed light, you can also go out and get a their Photox Strato 2. It's a receiver and transmitter. So one of them will get attached to your camera right on the top, and the other one will get attached to, you can set this side for light stand, and then the flash would just go on top of that. This side would talk to this side, and then you'll be able to achieve the same effect. So the way I set up my light stand is with this Bowens mount, which works nicely with soft boxes or anything else. So the light will fit right through there, and I don't even have to take off the modifier or anything like that, which is really cool. The most important thing that you need for this shot is a tripod. You cannot do this shot without a tripod. If you guys need help looking for any of this stuff, I'll make sure I link all this stuff in the description as well. So your next step is going to be setting up this shot. And now for this, you do have to make sure you have your sparklers, obviously your subject. The best way to do it is to put them in a darker environment, so this way you're not getting a ton of light that is flooding your lens and your sensor. And these sparklers are going to stand out. So the one thing that I always say is expose for your background and compensate with your flash. What that means is the way that your shot is exposed in your camera should be exactly what you want it to look like. And then from there, you can adjust your flash to make sure that your subject is well lit, or lit the way that you want it to look. So the first thing that I have to do is make sure I find my dark environment to put my subject. In this shot, it happened to be on the side of the venue. They have this field where the sun actually set behind. We did a shot earlier in that day that looked really nice. So it worked out just as well. And the way that I framed it, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting too much of the ground because some of the light may spill onto the ground, and that's not really what we want. Having the shot a little bit tighter in also helps so that the subject stands out a little bit more. The best thing that you can do is to try to get your shot as perfect as possible in camera. It's just going to create less work for yourself later on. So now I have my subject in the dark with my sparklers ready. My camera is set up on my tripod with the settings that I need, and the light is directly behind them, pointing right towards them, so that they are right between my light and my camera lens. So this way I'm not going to be able to see the light at all from where I am positioned. So the next step is to make sure that you have time to get this effect. And to do that, you're going to make sure you have a longer shutter speed so that it catches all of this light. And for this shot, my shutter was open for 6 whole seconds, which means it was recording light for an entire 6 seconds. Now within that 6 seconds, you want to make sure to tell your subject to stay as still as possible so that there is as little motion blur as possible. The next step is going to be to make sure that you have your sparklers ready with a lighter to light them. Now the way that we're set up from back to front is the flash, and then me with the sparklers. Then you have the subject, the couple, and my camera is right towards the front. Now, if you have an assistant or somebody to help out, you can have them hit the shutter, or I have also done it by myself with just setting it up on a timer. That works as well. You have to move a little bit quicker, but you can do it. A trigger is also super helpful for this shot. Either way, make sure you duck behind your subject, lighting the sparklers off right before you hit the shutter. So once the flash goes off, you have a silhouette of your subject recorded on the camera. And now you can go ahead and swing the sparklers as fast as you can. For this one, I believe I had to use the smaller sparklers. If you can get the bigger ones, it's a little bit easier. Either way, they both work, but I probably had to use 8 or 10 of the smaller ones for this shot. Now, as you're spinning them around in a circle about a foot or two behind them to make sure that nobody gets hurt, some of the sparks are gonna fly off and create this cool little effect that you see around the edge of the circle. Once the 6 seconds are up, the image will stop recording and you'll be left with a picture very similar to this. Now, you can get away with a little bit less than 6 seconds, but it might make it a little bit more difficult, and you can do more than 6 seconds, but you probably won't need much more than that. Now all you have to do is bring it into Lightroom to do a little bit of tweaking. Now, if you had to take a couple of different shots to make sure you got the look that you were going for, that's totally okay. If it looks a little bit different than this, it's okay. The nice part about shooting in RAW is it has a ton of information, so you're gonna be able to adjust it for the most part, as long as you didn't overexpose or underexpose your image too much. So the first thing that I like to do is go over to my tone curves, which are right here, and I'm gonna bring up my blacks just a little bit. So this is gonna make sure that our blacks aren't completely black, and it's gonna give us a little bit more of a softer, less contrasty image. So the next thing that I wanna do is bring down my darks just a little bit. I'm gonna bring down my whites, and I'm also going to bring up my highlights. And then I'm also gonna bring up my mids somewhere right in the middle. Not much, just enough. So the next thing that I wanna do is adjust the color temperature of the shot. So because of the sparklers, it comes out a little bit too warm. So if we just dial that down just a little bit, it's not gonna look so unnatural. All right, so the next thing that you can do here is bring down your highlights in your histogram just a little bit. And this creates a little bit more of a soft glow from the sparklers, so that it's not overpowering the image too much. And then I'm gonna bring up my shadows in my histogram just about halfway as well. Now, I know it probably looks a little bit too flat, so what we're gonna do is bring down our blacks in our histogram right about there. And just to make them stand out just a little bit more, I'm going to bring up the whites in my histogram right there. So now they look like they stand out a little bit more. One of the things I wanted to show you guys is what the shot would look like without any of the sparklers. So this is one of the test shots that I took right before, just so you can get an idea of what that looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the contrast just a little bit to really get that separation between the subject and the background, and right about there looks pretty good. I feel like if it was a little less saturated and vibrant, that would help to make the photo look not so yellow. And then the other thing that I'm going to do to really sharpen out those edges between the shadows and the highlights is to adjust my clarity just a little bit, just like that. So now we're looking pretty good. We have the shot exposed pretty well. The one thing that we're going to do a little bit later is adjust for the background is looking a little bit too exposed too much, so we will adjust for that. But what we're going to do first is work on the color. So the split toning is one of those things that's really going to make your shot stand out. And so for that, what I would really like to do is adjust the shadows, the color in my shadows, and I'm going to make that a little bit more orangey, a little bit more amber. If you want to see how it really affects your image. You can adjust the saturation all the way up and then adjust from there. Now we're getting towards the final stages of the way we want our photo to look as far as exposure and also the way that it's colored and saturated and stuff like that. So one of the last things that I usually do before I get into the smaller adjustments is to work on the hue and saturation of my colors. So for my style, I like to bring my yellows almost all the way to an orange tone to take out some of the unnatural yellows that you might find in some pictures. And I feel like it gives it a warmer, more natural look. We're also going to bring the saturation down on the yellows so that it's not overpowering the picture. So if you end up finding a style that you really like, what you can do is save it as a preset, and this way you can use it on all of your future photos, your work that you do in the future. And that is definitely helpful for workflow. You can apply it to a broad range of photos and then make micro adjustments from there. One of the other things that I like to make sure that I'm doing is enabling a profile correction in lens correction here. And that is going to make sure that if you have any vignetting from a lens that you're using, that it tends to take those out. So now we have our shot exposed the way that we want it, but there's certain things that we want to kind of tone down, like the background. What I ended up doing with this shot was using a radial filter, which is right here. And what I'm going to end up doing with that is making a radial filter right around where they are. So all I'm going to do is bring down my shadows for this shot so that this way they stand out just a little bit more. And so that's looking a lot better. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to darken these spots right down here, and usually the easiest way to do that is by using the graduated filter tool. And so from there we can apply a graduated filter. I usually have it set to somewhere around -0.7, and we can adjust on both sides. And this one I'm going to make a little bit darker, right around 2.5 stops down, and then the same thing on this side. And we're losing a little bit of the highlights on some of the part of the sparkler here. So what we can do is take the highlights and bring those back up. So now from here, if you feel like it's absolutely perfect, you can stop, or you can start to make little micro adjustments, which is what I'll usually do. And there you have it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. I'll be putting out videos every week to give you guys tips and tricks to help you guys out. Also comment to tell me things that you want to see in future videos, and make sure you follow me on Facebook and Instagram at WeddingPhotoNJ. Thanks so much, guys. See you down the aisle.